Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Behind the Work, the show for the very ambitious person looking to level up their lives, their careers, and their businesses. I'm your host, Jessica Santana, and if this is your first time tuning in, I want to say welcome to the show. So today I'm really excited because we are sitting with one of the most fabulous ladies I've ever met. Her name is Charlotte Castillo, and she is the Managing Director of Poderistas. And we're going to talk about what Poderistas is a little bit later on. But for now, I just want to say, Charlotte, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I feel so honored and humbled to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
And by the way, you're very fabulous too.
Thank you very much. And so, you and I met through Susie. I was looking for amazing guests for the show, and she nominated you, and she said you were phenomenal. And as I've gone deeper into your story and learning more about you, I was like, there's so much about your journey that really resonates with me as a Latina from New York. And so I actually want to start with that. I want to start with your formative years in New York City. You identify as a Brooklyn girl like me. You're from Dominican immigrant parents. Tell me about, those early years in New York City, and who was Charlotte as a young girl?
Well, yes, Dominicana, hija de immigrantes, like you said, and Brooklyn girl. Even though I did have a stint in the Bronx, my friends from the Bronx are like, you don't claim us, but my formative years are in Brooklyn. I consider myself a Brooklyn girl always. I went to public school. All through like middle school and high school, which I'm very proud of because then I ended up at a PWI, but we'll get a little bit into that later. I think, when I think of my youth and, being a child, I think of just like a lot of joy. My parents were both, working parents. We didn't have a lot of money, but there was a lot of joy, a lot of family. Every weekend was una fiesta, right? We made it. Dominicans get them together. They're drinking, they're eating, they're playing poker. And it was just a lot of joy, a lot of love, a lot of pressure, and also a lot of pressure. My parents, they would always say, and I have this ringing in my ear, like, mija, we'll always be laborers, somos obrero, right? That's why we came here for you. Your ticket out is education. Education. So wonderful message, wonderful. I'm so glad I had that, but it was a lot of pressure. Like literally my parents, I would show my report card and have like 93, 94, 95, because I was a nerd. I was a studious, and I did like to read and learn. My father was like, where are the rest of the points? Like, literally. And at one point, I thought I made that up. I thought I made that story up, and then my parents, passed away a couple years ago, and my dad, we were going through their stuff, and my mom would save everything. And I found a report card that said literally, it was like, 90s, like I remembered. And at that time, you had to like, the teacher would send you your report card, and then your parents had to send it back and sign it. And the teacher wrote a note, oh, Charlotte is excellent, very great student, congratulations, you should be proud. And my dad wrote a note, and I read it. Thank you so much, but if she were that excellent, there'd be hundreds. And
that's so funny.
And that is like the story of my childhood, growing up with my parents, like the pressure. Very thankful for it, but it was a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it's so funny because it reminds me of my own story. I remember my dad never wrote a letter back to my teachers or anything like that, but I remember I used to come home with like 90s, right? And I would be so happy, right? Like I was like top of my class, I graduated valedictorian in high school. I thought I was gente, I thought I was somebody. And my dad was very quick to humble me.
Yeah.
He was always just like, okay, 90, that's great. Where's your 100?
Yeah.
Because I don't teach 90, I teach 100. And I remember at some point asking myself, especially as I've like grown up and started like my own healing journey, like whether or not that was like a good thing or a bad thing.
Yes.
And I don't have an answer to that question yet, but I'll let you know what I come up with.
Ditto. I think it's both. I think it has its positives. It taught me so much. It made me who I am, right? It made us who we are, right? Like achieving, like you're doing all your things. You start your nonprofit. I've had my career. I work in a nonprofit, and I'm proud of all the work. But it also comes with a little bit of trauma that, every day I'm still working on. But I wouldn't have changed it, to be honest. If I could go back and they say, reset, I think that was the way, that was their gift to us. That's how I see it. That was their gift. And, that was their sacrifice. Like they came here, they left everything, right? They left everything behind for something better and they knew it wasn't necessarily for them, it was for their children, right?
For sure.
So that's what we are. We are a testament to that work. So, but it does come with its trauma, lots of therapy bills later, and still working on it, and it's all good. It's all good. It's part of the journey.
Yeah, for sure. And growing up in New York City, I always say that New Yorkers are some of the most resourceful people. And then I also say New York Latinos, like they are even above that level of resourcefulness, right? And so when you think about...
And then Latinas.
And Latinas, yes, and Latines. I mean, these days there's so many different varieties.
Women. I think women. And on top of that, I think we are,
Yeah, for sure. Latinas. Let's focus on women for this. So, Latinas, we're just very resourceful people. And I believe that we learn this through seeing our mothers and through seeing our fathers and through seeing our community members, our grandmothers, our sisters, just, make something out of nothing. And I think so much of what we see a lot is that inform our leadership later on in the way we do business, the way we build our careers. And so tell me a little bit about how, those experiences growing up in New York with your family, with these high standards, made you resourceful, and also what did it teach you about leadership?
Absolutely. I think what we just talked about made me super resourceful and ambitious, but also the adultification, right? Like I was 9 years old, 8 years old, but I spoke English and my mom did not speak English. So it's like, llámate al Con Edison. Con Edison, for those who don't know, in New York is like the power company. Hey, there's a bill I don't understand. My mom would say, call. And I was 8. What do I say? What do you mean, what do you say? You speak English. You have the tools that I do not have. Okay, I figured it out. And on it went. And I am not exaggerating. I was basically a secretary to my mom because she didn't have the language, she didn't have the tools. And because of that and that experience, I am super resourceful and super independent. And when I think about it, I always call myself a little bit of a utilitarian player from a career perspective. I'm like, you throw me in anywhere. Obviously, not surgery, but you throw me in anywhere and I can figure it out. I have the tools to be able to figure it out, the wherewithal, the resource, the network, the confidence, the just the thought process of like, I can do this. My parents did this. They struggled, they did all of this. I can do this, ask some questions, ask around, and I can make it happen. And if I don't know how to make it happen, I can find someone who can make it happen. But all of those experiences, all those calls to Con Edison, all those translating letters, all those writing letters for lawyers, for whatever it was, at a very young age, that led me there, and gave me the tools to be able to kind of figure most things out. So, again, traumatic. There's trauma there because I think you have to acknowledge that. But also it's what made me who I am. So I'm super grateful for it because I've been, and I won't say lucky. I think I've been able to use those tools and use that skill and use that experience to do a lot of different things.
Yeah, absolutely. On the point of translation, I think one thing that I really love about your career and the things I've learned is that you seem to have been translating, sure, for your family and navigating all these different spaces, but in some ways or form, like you also have become a translator between a growing population of Latinas and the dualities a lot of times that they have to navigate. And you became the head of marketing for Latina Magazine, which was the first bicultural publication, which I don't think people realize like how important that publication was when it started. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you've learned about translating a culture to that has different audiences to a group of people. And also, what was it like to be there in the beginning of the publication?
The boom.
The boom, yeah.
The first Latino boom or the second one. There have been so many. It's funny. And I'm dating myself, which I don't really mind, but this summer, will mark 30 years that Latina Magazine launched, which is hard to believe. Like, 30 years feels like it went by in a flash, but at the time, we were doing something different, right? You know, I was part of the launch team and started out, part-time and then kind of became one of the first or the first marketing director. But there were other publications out there, but they were in Spanish because the thinking was at the time that to reach Hispanic women, as they were called, Hispanic, Latina now, right? You had to speak to them in Spanish, right? And that was what was commonly known. And this woman, Christy Halbecker, who actually I just saw, who's still a friend, I stay with her when I come to LA. She thought, well, no, I want to see magazines like me. And by the way, I don't speak that much Spanish, but I'm still Latina. And I know that there's a lot of people that I know that are Latina that have this. And she did research, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what led to Latina Magazine, right? With the partnership with Essence, who had gone through a similar story for the African American community of women. But one of the things about Latina that was really interesting to me and really gelled it, I was a New Yorker, born and raised in New York, Dominicana. I had never left New York. And in that job, my job was promotions coordinator. I had to travel the country to sell, to get Latinas to get excited. My first job was, Charlotte, build a college campus tour where Latinas are. How do I do that? I don't know, figure it out. And back then, there was the internet, but barely. I mean, really, like it wasn't like all these resources on hand. Like I literally was calling universities and trying to find Latinas and trying to figure out, based on census, where the Latinas were in some schools. Created this kind of roadmap of a Latina tour and went on this tour to introduce the magazine to young women on campuses. Plus, I attended what I lovingly call all the nacho festivals around the country, right? Like, I went to Phoenix and Tucson and all the cities in Texas and Chicago and LA, and I was astounded. I was like, whoa. By the way, Dominicans aren't the center of the world. Right, there are these other Latinas, like, Mexican, and obviously there were Mexicans in New York, but not to the numbers that there are now, right? Back 30 years ago, there were, but not as many. The population just hadn't migrated there yet as much. So it was really fascinating to me to see that this community of Latinas that were different than me and that they ate different things and they kind of sounded, they had different accents, but we had a lot of similarities, right? And part of our pitch to advertisers, because they were like, well, why can't they just, these women that you're reaching, read magazines in English or Spanish or read magazines from their home country? And I would always say, and we kind of all agreed, I, as a Dominicana from New York, born and raised, have more in common with a Mexicana from LA, born and raised, or a Mexicana from Texas than a Dominicana from the Dominican Republic. I just do, right? Our experiences living in the United States kind of brought us together. Being otherized in the United States brought us together. Pop culture brought us together. So we pitched that. We were like, look, there's this version of Latinidad. Yes, it has its challenges and all this stuff, but there's this version of Latinidad that really brings us together. So we were pitching and marketing a magazine, but it was also a community. Yeah. It was this idea of this community of Latinas we were the first in our families, the first generation to go to college, the first career women. So that was also a shared experience, traumatic with trauma, but lots of lessons and lots of joy and lots of pride. So that's kind of what we're pitching and we're selling and we're building together through the magazine. And then fast forward with the work that I do now, I feel like I've kind of gone full circle, right? Like now I'm also continuing to build community through a lifestyle lens, but also this idea of like, okay, now there's so many of us, and yes, your lifestyle matters and taking care of yourself matters, but what are we doing with this? Like, what's that impact? What can you do with it? And, we'll talk more, later about Poderistas, but that's what I'm really proud of, is that it's gone from acknowledging and belonging, and now it's like, okay, yes, let's acknowledge as belong, but what are we doing? Let's harness that power, because we have it. It's not enough just to be numbers in terms of census, right? Because we've been saying it, we've been hearing it. If we're not taking action, those numbers don't matter, right? We become a silent majority. So that's kind of the cycle, and I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. I really, really just want to say that is fantastic. I would say also that your experiences really resonate with mine as well. When I was in New York City, I grew up in New York City, born, raised, stood there until I was like 30 years old. The only time I left New York was like I spent one interesting year in DC, but then every other year, unless I was in college, I was in New York City. And it was the first time when I moved to LA, and, back in 2019, where I met a different kind of Latina. And like you, I think I was like, wait, everybody's not Puerto Rican?
Right,
What's
exactly.
going on? And then I realized, like, oh, wow, we are different. And they are beautiful in their own ways. Their culture is beautiful. But I still see, like, pieces of myself as well. And so I will say, like, your exposure outside of New York City to Latinidad is just so important. And then now, you know, I spent some time in Miami, and I've met a lot of, like, women who are Cuban. I'm like, oh, wow, you guys are different, but also the same at the same time. And so this, you know, story you're sharing about, like, how you were able to see the differences, but also have this unifying factor among all of us is, like, pretty incredible. Go ahead.
And I'll add one thing that I think is really interesting. I remember, you know, and I consider myself an Afro-Latina, and I am, you know, but in New York, I'm Dominican, right? Like, especially back then, I'm Dominican. It was never a question. I'm Latina, I'm Dominican. When I started traveling, it was funny. I would go to some of these festivals, and a lot of people would be like, oh, how cool, a sister, you know, representing Latinos. We need more of that. And I was like, yes, and I'm Latina, you know, and they were like blown away. So it was like also like a two-way learning, right? Like it wasn't just me. It was like, oh, there wasn't a lot of exposure to Dominicanas or to Latinas who looked like me necessarily. And that was fascinating to me. I was like, oh, wow, interesting. And I would always be like, yeah, I am Black and I am Latina. And I speak Spanish, and it was always like a real interesting conversation, and people would always be like, wow, that's so cool, I didn't know. So again, I saw it as this opportunity to just understand each other, like, you know, like when you came. And again, this was years and years ago, and there's more openness, and there's obviously many more women representing and Latinos representing in Hollywood. Not as enough, but more than there were 30 years ago, right? I mean, Latina Magazine was Jennifer Lopez's first cover. Yeah. And that was before she was J-Lo. Yeah. Like, she was on Money Train. That was her big movie, and she was about to come out in Selena. That's how long ago we were around, and that's how kind of like before this boom. But it was the first time that you were seeing representation across the spectrum as best as possible. You know, people, you could go back and there are probably flaws, but it was hard because there weren't that many Latina women in Hollywood that you could really kind of would sell a magazine, frankly, right? It was hard, but we had some beautiful, incredible covers with a nice spectrum of women and backgrounds and stories. So it was a good time. Yeah. The heyday.
Yeah, for sure.
It was fun.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important that you're saying that, because it reminds me a lot about, like, the complicated history we have, you know, our intersections with the diaspora, and us not all looking the same and still coming from the same places, right? And I think it oftentimes lands with me as, like, you know, you might not know us in the ways in which, you know us to see us on TV as, but, like, when you do get to know us, you realize that there's so much dynamism in the Latina community that makes you want to get to know us even more, you know? And so when you think about, like, the time you spent at Latina, right, what ultimately made you say, you know, I've done everything that I can here, to actually now go and put yourself in a position to work at ViacomCBS? You know, Viacom is a really big company, and why did you decide to take your talents there?
You know, I've always loved pop culture and media, and I had been a Latina for 8 years, and I loved it. I mean, it was like family. Like I said, many people that were there were still family, friends, etc. But it was also very like family, complicated, and also it was comfortable, right? And I was like, I want to know if I can do this somewhere else. It was like testing myself. Like, yes, I can do it at Latina. I felt safe. It felt safe, like family, but I was like, okay, it's time for me to know, can I do this in a bigger setting? And by the way, I did publishing, and, you know, again, this was a while back, but I was like, oh, publishing is challenged, and it still is. I mean, there's I don't know how many less percentage of magazines out there now in the newsstands, but it was a dying industry, although it seems to be having a little bit of a comeback. But so I wanted to do television. I did music, and then I did magazines, and I wanted to do television, and I'd go like this because literally we were at 1500 Broadway, and MTV was across the street at 1515, and I was always like, I want to be there where TRL was, and you know. And I didn't think I could do it. Back to that, right? Like, somebody sent me a job description, someone who used to work at Latina on my team, and said, hey, Charlotte. And I always told her, keep an eye out. There's a job I think you'd be great for. She sent it to me. And I read it, and I was like, I didn't even understand it. I was like, what is this? It was licensing. I was like, I don't know what licensing is. And a friend of mine at Latina, an ally, I would say, who worked there at the time, she was amazing. And she was like, Charlotte, you got this. When you do this, you do this. Like, she helped me translate, right, the work that I did at Latina to this work that they were asking for. She's like, you can learn the licensing stuff. It's a business. And that's why she was there at Latina. So I always been really grateful to her when I think back, because I wouldn't have applied, because I was like, and you hear that as a running theme. Like, I was like, I can't do this. Like, you always doubt yourself. So I applied for the job, and I went, and actually the person who was my boss, he said the same thing. He's like, you have the transferable skills. You know how to build a brand. You know how to write a marketing plan. You'll learn licensing. Here's the book. So I got hired, which was amazing. I was frightened, right? I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. It was licensing. I wanted to get into television, right? But that was an easy kind of backdoor way to get in. It was an ancillary business within the big business of television and IP, intellectual property. So, I was under the licensing group under Nickelodeon Jr., right? So I said, okay, I'll figure this out. And then my career, I was 15 years in licensing. Like, I thought I was going to use that to get in and then get into television. But when I realized what I was doing was brand strategy, brand marketing, this idea of taking an IP and understanding how can you really build it out? What are the other properties? What are the other things and kind of shoot out, output that you can do beyond the content? And I love that. Like, I think it's really interesting. And I learned about it and, got some great opportunities while I was there. Ended up my career there 15 years, and I ended up being, my last position was SVP of global brands for Viacom, which was funny when I think back. When I started, I was, director of brand management or whatever for like Nick Jr. and really grew the portfolio. But I walking in, I thought, I can't do this job, right? And then I ended up, and obviously it's 15 years, a long time, and I did different things, like different tours throughout. But for me, it was time, to answer your original question, it was time to take my energies and see if I could do it, to fly, right? See, can I take this kind of expertise, this marketing thing that I figured out at Latina and had this formula, and we did well, I thought, and do it somewhere else, right? And add, right? Because, we were ambitious, and, what else do I want to do? I always thought I wanted to be a CMO at a media company. That was like my goal. So I thought, that's what I need to do. I need to do television, the big kahuna, not so much anymore, but it was at the time.
Yeah. And it feels like everyone that I talk to for this podcast or just friends that I know, the pandemic time was a really pivotal time where they started asking themselves a different set of questions. This was also the time where you got involved with Poderistas, which is where you're at now as its managing director. You could have kept a career in corporate. Like, after you spend a significant amount of time like that to build up a brand, both personally and professionally, what made you say, I actually want to transition into the nonprofit sector? And what made you feel called to the mission of Poderistas?
Well, those are two great questions, very different. I would be lying if I said that was a planned process. I would be. That was not kind of the plan.
Yeah.
After 15 years, I remember in the fall of 2019, I was like, I'm ready. Like, I was so tired. It's very political. The higher up you go, the less work you're doing. It's more about managing up. And I was tired. I was really tired. I had a great team, 30 people around the world. It was wonderful. And I traveled the world, but I was tired, and I was ready for something new. Again, I was like, okay, ya 15 años, enough. I have to go somewhere else because I get comfortable. So I started looking around, but then 2 months later, that was the fall, the end of and Viacom remarried with CBS, because at the time when I first started, it was ViacomCBS, MTV Network. Then they broke up a year into the time when I started in 2005. And forever, it was like two separate companies. And then in the fall of 2019, they got remarried, right? Okay. That's the media, comes and goes and merges and remerges. So they remerge. And when that happens, there's so many redundancies. So in the first quarter of 2020, they laid off thousands of people. And my job was one of them. me tocó, right? Because I had been through 9 reorgs and survived them all and was able to do whatever. This one was my time, and it was perfect timing, right? It was perfect timing for me. I got a lovely, package. It was great because I had a contract. And my last day was February of 2020, the last Friday of February 2020, and 2 weeks later, the world shut down. I mean, literally, right? The world, and New York shut down, and the country shut down, because parts outside of this country, there were things already happening. So that was like a pause. Like, I remember when I was laid off, I was like, yay, I'm going to have money and time. I'm going to do things that I want to do. I'm going to take some time off, because I never, you go from job to job, 2 weeks maybe. I'm going to visit my parents who lives in Florida. I'm just going to do me, spend time with my kids, spend time with my family. 2 weeks later, the world shut down, and that was like, oh, okay, I guess not. I'm gonna really be like still and really have to think about what to do. And I spent the time with my kid and my husband and whatever. And then I got a call from, guess who? Because relationships matter, Christy Halberger. She called me and said, hey, I know you have some time on your hands. I'm launching this thing with 9 other Latinas, really amazing women, and we need help launching it. We have a team, it's a small team, but we need your help. We know you can come in here. There's a marketing piece to this that we're missing. Come in and help. I was like, sure, anything you say. She's like, well, I'll send you the deck. I was like, anything for you, but send me the deck. And then I look at the deck, and I'm like, oh, my God. It's Christy. It's Monica Ramirez, who, look her up if you don't know her. She's an amazing organizer, advocate, lawyer, Time 100 person, Carmen Perez-Jordan, America Ferrera, Eva Longoria, et cetera, plus Christy, who I love, and it's like family. I was like, absolutely, I'll come and help. And she's like, well, we have no money. It's a volunteer. We're launching a nonprofit. I was like, lo que sea, whatever you need, this sounds great. And the idea of the nonprofit was, we want women to be more civically engaged. We want them to get civically engaged. And there's a whole backstory to it. We don't probably have time for it. But, and there's a plan, and we want to get women excited. And I don't know if you remember, the fall of 2020 was a very big presidential election at the time of COVID. And when there was fear that COVID, people were not going to vote. Right? Because people didn't want to go outside, stay online, wear masks, the whole thing. And there was suppression potentially going to happen as well. So it was a big push to, we have to make sure Latinas go out and vote. Latinas and Latinos, but the focus of this was Latinas due to some research. So again, it was Christy calling. I looked at the deck and said, this is amazing. I could use my skills, right? Like my superpowers of coming in and figuring it out and helping them launch this thing. It was meant to be temporary. It was meant to be volunteer. So we launched, and it was a pilot program, really, and it took off. Like, the women responded, and obviously we had the backing of amazing, talented women, part of the net, the founders. But I think women really connected with the message. So it took off, quickly built. So it was kind of like, oh, wait, we launched in August of 2020. By December, we're like, okay, this is a thing beyond the election. What are we going to do? The woman who was managing director at the time, she wanted to leave. She decided to go, and they were like, well, Charlotte, will you be our leader? Help us figure out what's next for the organization, build a strategy. We know you're going to be looking for, you're looking for a corporate thing. But, do this, just keep us posted. And I've never left. And I had personal loss. My father passed away. My mother passed away. My husband passed away, all within a very short amount of time, 17 months. And I interviewed with all the people, the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Warner Bros., like all the people, because I thought I was going to do corporate. But the more life was happening, and the more I was getting into Poderistas, and the more I just thought about it, I was like, I don't want to go back there. Like, I just didn't. The thought of having those, like, conversations in those boardrooms, that I just was like, I can't go back to that. After everything we've seen, after everything I had gone through, after so much important work that I felt needed to be done, this impact work, I felt like, no, I love this work, and I love this community, and I want to stay as long as we can, as long as they'll have me. And it's been, in August, it'll be 6 years that we launched. In July, it'll be 6 years that I started, and hopefully we'll do another 6 more. We'll see, because it's a nonprofit, it's a tough time. But yeah, that's my story. So it wasn't planned, but I listened to, kind of what my heart was saying. I listened to what, like, my life was telling me that I needed. And then I had this network of women that kind of supported it and asked me to do this and supported me through it. And Christy, who, again, in terms of lessons, career lessons, she was somebody that I've known. I've known her for 30 years, right? And she called me, right? And we have a good familiar relationship. So I think that's always a big lesson that I tell young people is like, don't burn any bridges, nurture those relationships because they're all important, right? And now, even though Poderistas is a nonprofit, there's a lot of people that I've know from my old kind of media days that I pull back and I'm like, hey, because we do a lot of content and storytelling. So I kind of lean into that, which is one of the reasons I really love Poderistas. We do this impact work in a really, I think, interesting way that those relationships still stand.
Yeah, absolutely. 2020, August 2020, that was a moment also of social unrest. A lot of people were living in fear, and obviously we wanted to get Latinas civically engaged through Poderistas. Can you tell me a little bit about what was the hypothesis on focusing on Latinas? Like, what was the need, and what were we hoping Latinas to accomplish during this time frame and with this movement? And has that theory now evolved since you've been there for 6 years, which I imagine you've seen a lot?
It's a great question. I think the theory, and it goes back to what we said earlier, like that if you get the women, you get the family. I mean, really, like if you can touch the woman and you can reach the woman, she will kind of bring her family along. I think at the very core of it, that's why Latinas. I think the way we do our work, a little bit of the origin story, and again, there are 10 founders, so there are different pieces of it, but one of the origin story pieces that I think is really relevant to this is, America and Eva and, a few others that actually aren't founders of Poderistas, but are still kind of close to the family. And Christy used to work at CAA, so they used to be called, every election, so for the last few, by candidates and parties to say, hey, help us get out the Latino vote. And we still see that, right? But like 2 weeks before an election or like a month before an election, help us get out the Latina vote. So they would do these like tours, a Super Mujeres tour. They would go city to city and they would rally the women and say, hey, come on, we, hear about this candidate, your voice is important, et cetera. And what was interesting is that there were some questions about the policy and the candidates, but a lot of times there were just questions about, really, my vote matters? You think my vote matters? Really, sometimes I'm not clear about how to vote or where to vote. They make it so confusing. Like sometimes it was really simple questions that people were just like, they didn't feel like their voice mattered, their vote mattered, that they didn't want to make a mistake, that they felt like they didn't have enough information, too much information they could trust. So it was this idea that it wasn't necessarily an apathy issue. It was an issue of confidence and motivation. So that's at the heart of the work that we do, that is this confidence and motivation gap that we're trying to fill. There's lots of civic engagement groups on the ground that do amazing work, and they do voter registration, and they're knocking on doors, and that's great, and they register folks to vote. And then there's other groups that do like balloting and then getting them out to vote. But there's no work. There's very few people that are doing the work in between. We see ourselves doing this work in between that's a little bit less tangible, but it's this idea of like, okay, you're registered, but why don't you vote consistently? And why don't you get your friends to vote? And what more do you need? And you're stressed because you don't take time for yourself, and you're working, and you're nurturing or caregiving your kid and your older, your parent and your partner, and you're going to school and you're starting businesses. So we see, but Latinas are expected to like support the community.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
On our backs, right? Support the community and build businesses and be positive and take it all in. I mean, we've seen, I'm not going to get into that, but and sacrifice. So in our minds, we are resourcing Latinas. We are giving them, pouring into them so they feel supported, they feel resourced, and they feel ready and motivated and excited to then support the community with their voices, with their votes, with their kind of networks, and getting other people around them. Because, I'm sure you have this experience that you're probably the first or one of the few in your family, and when things happen, your mommy, your abuela, your prima, your tia call you, mija, what is this going on? Tell me what I should do. Or you're the go-to person. So a lot of our community, that's who they are, their go-to person. So we are like, they're like micro-influencers within their networks. Let's make sure they have the right information. Let's make sure they feel resourced. Let's make sure they feel jazzed and ready and able and armed with words and love and all the things to kind of to take action, And again, we're nonpartisan. We don't tell you who to vote for. We just want you to go do it. Really. Like at the end of the day, for me, it'd be like Latinas broke records and they voted, and look at the numbers. It's not even about who, it's about that they went out, because the more we don't do it, people are not going to pay attention to us.
Absolutely.
Right? So did that answer your question? So
Yes.
just I go off and I don't answer.
No. I love it. No, you did answer the question. And I believe that people don't know this, but Latinas are the fastest growing voting bloc. And we're also extremely diverse in our thoughts and our experiences.
Yes.
We're not a monolith.
We are not.
And people try to talk to us very directionally. And so when you think about the work of Poderistas, what do you think are the things you're learning about like catering to all of our different backgrounds and experiences? And are there things that work for all of us? And are there things that don't work for all of us?
It's a lot of questions.
Yes.
I will say one of the things, and one of our founders says this, and I think it's a good quote. It's like the Latinos, not just Latinas. Latinos are like, consider us a huge mega swing state. You talk to us, well, you know, you come, you knock on our doors, you listen. We are going to vote for you. But right now, not enough people are doing that on either party, any party, right? The people are not doing that enough. I think, you know, this time, it is very difficult to be a C3. I mean, it is, because there's a lot of stuff happening that, for me, as an individual, it's about values. It's not about parties, it's not about politics, it's about values. But things are so politicized that it's tough sometimes to even make statements about things, even though you're like, wait, this has nothing to do with party. It's hard. It's really difficult. So trying to figure out the messaging is always an ongoing challenge. Messaging that'll move people, messaging that people will understand and see clearly where we stand as an organization. I think people know, but I think, you know, sometimes people are like, wait a minute, why aren't you saying this? And it's like there's the education that we have to do sometimes to say, well, this is what it means to be a C3. And we have to be clear on that, right? But I think C3 work is really important because, to your point, I think what works is when you are not, you know, beating somebody down with a particular party or person, you know, candidate message. When you're giving them information, when you're empowering them so they feel informed and ready and they can make their decisions because they know best, right? They know best what's great for their families, for their communities. But because there's so much information and people don't know what to trust, that's our work. And I think that's, to me, the secret is this idea of becoming a trusted messenger. And that's a huge responsibility, right? To make sure that when we post things, that when we share information, when we share posts, that we're vetting it, that we're getting it from trusted sources. And by the way, we don't want to be the ones kind of gatekeeping that. We also want to train our community and show them, and we do content about how to spot bad, you know, how do you check sources, et cetera, because we want them, again, to give them tools so that they can do it themselves, or so that we can do it ourselves, and that they can kind of pass it on. But I think I agree with what you said. It's like, it's about it's about also understanding the whole woman, which again, which is why our lifestyle plus civic engagement formula is really key for us. Because if we were to talk about voting, you know, policy, et cetera, every day, 365, or, you know, we wouldn't have the audience that we have. Like, we wouldn't, because people don't live like that. People get tired of that. People they have other things. They want joy in their lives. They want support. They want to know how to keep, you know, build generational wealth. They want to know what's best for their kids. So we try to be there and support as much of that. And then we slip in the civic engagement, and we try to tie those together, right? Absolutely. If you really like, for example, hey, mom, if you're really worried about the education that your kid is getting, here's some tools for you to get, and here's what you should look for. Here's what, you know, and they're at this age. And by the way, you can impact this being in your community school by doing this. Have you ever been to a city council meeting? Have you ever considered running for a city council position or school board position? So this idea that every decision you make is actually tied to civic engagement. It's actually tied to your power. And that's the way that we try to approach it. It's like everything: where you shop, what content you consume, what food you eat, you know, what restaurants you frequent, where you send your kids to school. All of that really is about you kind of doling out little pieces of your power and you don't even know it, right? So we're trying to get people to say, hey, think about it. Think about where you're spending. Think about how you're spending. Think about the questions you're asking, or asking the teachers, the principals, et cetera, in your school. Because we have more power than we really realize. And I get why. Because we've been taught that we have these people kind of making all the decisions, but they work for us.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, they work for us. And, I'm coming from New York, and you're in New York now, where I'm like so excited about what's happening in New York. Whether you like him or not, the fact that he's bringing policy to the people and like gamifying it and like, hey, tell us what you want us to do, and it's gonna be a bracket, and what wins, I'm gonna do it myself, and then we're gonna do the other 100 things. I'm like, it sounds crazy, but it's fun. People are into it. People are engaged and sending him notes and calling and emailing and saying, I want you to fix that pothole. That's engagement. That's how you want citizens to be.
Absolutely.
You work for us, but you have to exercise that power,
Yeah. No, I do know. Shout out to New York.
Yes.
Shout out to New York.
Yes.
I feel like we're getting it right now.
I know.
But let me also say, like, I think that one of the things that you mentioned was, that 501c3 work right now is really hard, and Poderistas is a 501c3. I'm curious if listeners today had the ability to change the trajectory for you and what you're doing with Poderistas, what would you want them to know about why investing in this organization is important?
I mean, we did our first crowdfunding campaign for our 5th anniversary, and we've been hesitant because we're like, this is about the community. We don't want to ask for the community, but this is about the community, and this is your community. So for me, that's to me the important message is like we do an annual survey every year. We look at our content. We listen to the feedback in the comments. We do surveys before and after every event. Like we really want to do the work and the programming for the community, for what we need, what we're hearing, what we're seeing. So an investment in us is an investment back in you. And an investment in, for us, we're like, if if you're asking me, I would love for, we have close to 200 in aggregate across all our platforms. We have about 500,000 women that follow us, subscribe, read our newsletters, etc. I'm like, oh my God, if all those women gave $1 a month, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Or $5 a month. And just, people give. Like, that would be a lot of money. That would support an organization like us. But people don't think that. They think, I have to give 1,000. No, like, if you think about giving, and by the way, giving is a part of action as well. Like, you're choosing where you're supporting, what organizations you're supporting. That would make an impact in an organization like us. And then, by the way, if you choose not to do Poderistas, that's fine. But there are other small organizations that could really benefit from that kind of regular recurring giving, because actually that sometimes helps you get funding, as you know, from other funders, because they'll look at that. Hey, is your community engaged? We're not a member base in terms of like you have to pay to be a member. We consider ourselves member. People come to us, say, I'm a member of Poderistas. We're like, great. Or people say, how can I become a member? Like, do you follow the content? You're a member. Like it's not a pay to play kind of thing. Everybody, if you consider yourself a Poderista, you are a Poderista. That's, but that's how people can support us. And why? Because it's about them. It's about, we want to see Latinas at every seat at the table. Political, economic, cultural. We want her behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. We want her running stuff. We want her doing whatever she wants to do. Really, if she wants to have kids and stay home, great. You have the power to make that decision and do it. Like, just own your power, and our organization is about that, reflecting back that power. So again, an investment in us would be that, like helping us do that more effectively, bigger, better. Because we do what we can, but we're small. People think we have a huge team. We don't. But, we have a lot of love. We have a small but mighty team.
Yes. And so then, when you think about your own career, Charlotte, your career has just been so dynamic. And it's been very clear that you care about Latinas and you care about our well-being. In this stage of your life, what does Latina power mean to you? And what do you hope your legacy for Latinas is? I was asking existential questions. No. But what do you hope that you leave as your legacy for Latinas? Because you're it. Yeah, let's be clear. Like, when you think about what amazing Latinas look like I wish I knew you sooner, right? Like, I think it would have made a difference when I was in high school looking for what I was looking for. It was very rare for me to see that as a New Yorker, as a Latina in corporate. And so I want you to know, you did the thing. You did the thing.
Thank you. You know, and I feel like I'm at this age. I'm 54. I'm very like whatever. That's how I'm a Gen Xer. I'm proud Gen Xer actually because I think we're super resilient.
But shout out to the skin because you don't look 54.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, mommy and abuelita. I feel like because people, like, what's your superpower? What's your thing? Like, I'm about building community, even on a personal level. Like, that's what I do. Like, I love to build community. I love bringing people together. I love, somebody called me something. Was it you? Somebody, I was like, oh, I like that. They were like, you're a curator of, what was it that they said? You're a curator of vibe. I was like, I like that.
I usually say stuff like that. So maybe
somebody
it was me.
said it. I don't remember who it was, but I was like, I really love that. I do. Like, I love experiences. I love community. I love people. And for me, I want my legacy to be for people to know they can do anything they want. I mean, literally, like you can dream big. I know that sounds so cliche, but as a Latina from Brooklyn, went to, public school, whatever, from Dominican parents, like I think about that. I'm like, I don't know that I thought that I would do what I've done. And I, every once in a while I'm like, yeah, I've done a lot. I've traveled the world. I've climbed bridges, which I did. I climbed a bridge in Sydney. I've, done a bunch of stuff that I'm super proud of. But the thing I'm most proud of is the communities that I've built and that I've nurtured and the women. And I have to say, I love women. Like, I just do. I've realized as I've gotten older, like, I have these amazing female friends that are like my sisters. I don't have a blood sister. So I feel like I've kind of been always like looking for that, and I have built that. So I've done that through my jobs, through work, but I also do it on a personal level. And for me, it's just about this idea of like, we can do anything. Like, we're really like the black girl magic. I mean, there's a Latina magia, right? Like, I really, this resilience that, yes, has trauma associated with it, and you have to deal with that. But I think there's something proud. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of, I've gone through a lot. The last few years have been hellish. I'm a solo mom to a 16-year-old brown boy, he lost his dad at 12. Like, I didn't know that was my story, right? That was how my story was going to be written. And, there's a lot of sadness, but there's also like joy. Like, I celebrate joy, So I don't know. So this idea of building community, I think, is really important, and touching people. But also, I also consider myself a radical optimist. Like, despite all of that, like, I've always been super optimistic. I think it's a little bit, I don't know. I like to claim this as a Dominican thing. I feel like Dominicans are really optimistic. But in general, like, we're always like in a jovial kind of mood. And my dad was super optimistic always. And I love that about myself, that I always am looking for like the positive and like, what did I learn? And how can I grow from this? And what was the, what can I take from this versus like, oh God, right? Like, oh my God, you do a little bit of that. And then you're like, okay, come on, dust yourself off. You something good is going to come from it. Spin it, figure it out, spin it. And that's me.
Yeah. Yeah, in the history of Behind the Work, I've always told people, oh, I'm about to cry. I actually never really cried. Actually, I'm shedding like tears. No,
I made you cry.
You did.
Poderista's events are famous for making people cry. In positive tears.
No, you did. I mean, part of it is like, I think about the future version of me a lot. I think about the future version of me a lot, and as you're talking, I like see myself. You say so many of the same things that I say. Someone recently asked me what I want my own personal legacy to be, and I always talk about community. I'm always inviting people into my house. I'm always cooking for them. Yes. I've instituted something called family dinner, where I every Sunday I'm inviting friends and family to come over.
Dinner, yeah.
Yeah, and hosting
chosen
parties.
Family is the best.
Yeah, and hosting parties, and recently I did the Benito Bowl party at my house, and I did a New Year's Eve party, and so as you were talking, I was just imagining myself years from now, and what do I also want to say. So I feel like sometimes when you're young, you're trying to figure things out, and even trying to think about your future. You're often basing that and framing it in terms of like, what do you want your legacy to be? And I've been trying to seek that question out myself. And sometimes I'm like, it is community, it is moving culture forward. And sometimes I don't know if that's a good answer. But as you talk, I'm like, oh, this is an amazing answer.
I think it could evolve for you, right? And I also think one thing that my lesson in the last few years is like, life is short. So yes, you want to think about your legacy in the future, but be present. Like, enjoy what you're doing. You're doing amazing stuff right now. You have a legacy you've already built, and you don't have to think about 20 years from now. Like, you're doing badass stuff, right? I don't know if I can say that. Badass stuff right now. So, which is amazing. I mean, you said, I was recently at Harvard. Poderistas was honored by the LEAD group. They have a Latina empowerment, some I don't know, it stands for, it's LEAD. And they have a conference every year. They've had for 10, 11 years. And I remember going in there and was like, it was amazing. Like, I almost cried. I think I had tears, because it was like, and there weren't women just from Harvard mostly, but they come from all across the country, women in college, these like young Latinas all dressed up in suits and like whatever. And I was like, wow, when I was in school, I graduated in 1994. Again, dating myself, but that wouldn't have happened. Or if it would have happened, it would have been a small room. There were women around, obviously, in my college. It was small, like small numbers. It was so beautiful. I'm so happy that we've come this far. We need to go further, but we have come far, and I think we need to celebrate now and think about legacy. Like, I think you are building your legacy already. So all that to say is like, don't discount what you're doing now, and also live a little bit in the present, because life is short, baby.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, really, it can all be gone. I don't want to be morbid, but it can. Like, enjoy.
Yeah, thank you. Free game, y'all. Free game. Okay. And so how do you see the role of Poderistas evolving over the next 5 years? We're at a really big moment of inflection in our society. At the same time, there's also like the rapid development of like AI and innovation. I'm just curious, as a publication, like, what do you, or not just a publication, you guys do so much more than that. It's a community. What do you see for the brand over the next 5 years?
I mean, in my true kind of brand strategy, I was like, I love to have offshoots, right? Like, I have this idea of like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had a series of books, if we had podcasts, if we had content, all of that. But, all of that requires infrastructure, support, resources. But I think it's possible. I see us as, my goal is that we are not just paying homage to the past, is that we're talking about the women that are doing things in the present, and that we're predicting about the future and the future of Latinas. And that's the thing that I'm trying to do a little bit more about, and talking to some folks about how can we do that. I don't want to, we love Women's History Month and Latino History Month. It's great. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but what's the future? How can we get ahead of it? How can we not let it happen to us, but be part of it happening? And I think in order for that to happen, our community needs to kind of have the tools to do that. You spoke about AI, and we've been having conversations about that. Our community is behind. I know I'm behind, but I'm an Xer, so I have an excuse. I'm trying to but like, how do we arm them? What kinds of programs can we build so that our leaders and our leaders in the making are equipped for what's coming? It's coming. Can't be afraid of it. You just have to know how to use it and how to navigate it and leverage it. So I see us having a role in that, and hopefully informing that and informing communities in kind of also informing what we need, like doing some research. There's some research that I would love to do. I would love for us to kind of be at the forefront of doing some research in the community. There's not enough of it on our community, especially if you slice just Latinas. There's stuff on Latinos generally, but I think doing just Latinas is important because we have other challenges, physically, emotionally, the pressures we talked about. Like, I think there's a whole other subset of stuff that requires and would benefit from some real laser sharp focus. So I would love to do that. And just continue to grow the community, and maybe, becoming like we have chapters in every city or chapters in every state. And these are women that are doing their thing in each of these cities and organizing. And we have a small version of that. We have our group called the Power Squad, and we have the Power Squad leaders. We just named our 10 cohorts, and it's an amazing group of women ranging from a college student here in LA who's like 20 something to like a 40+ year old mom of 2. And they're all like, we want to take action. We want to organize organize our community. We want to do something, for this camp, this midterm and beyond. So we're excited about that in 10 cities. So they're going to do city focused. But we'd love to scale that and have that kind of be a continuous program that we kind of inspired and that people just kind of continue to do. So I think the sky's the limit. It's just challenged.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, resources and time. But I'm a radical optimist.
Yes.
So I believe that we just need the right set of tools, the right kind of partnerships and collaborations, and I think the right plans, and I think we can get there.
Yeah, for sure. And so then what do you think the future of Latina civic engagement looks like?
I think that it extends beyond just talking about elections, right? Because that's and when I first joined Poderistas, I remember I was like, well, what happens after the election? I dropped my drinks, okay. We're building this community and doing, I'm like, what happens after the election? Because we're so focused on that particular election. And I think this idea that civic engagement is just about elections is the thing that we've been trying to dispel for a long time. Like every day is a moment for participating, being an active participant in your community. That's really what civic engagement is. Mm-hmm. Voting is one way. So for me, the future is that we're having these conversations regularly, and we do, but that more people are having the conversations regularly. That this is something that that Latinas are having at the dinner table, right? Like they're talking about it and imparting that to their kids. That and ultimately that Latinas are like the number one voting bloc, right? That they are voting to the numbers that we have. Mm-hmm. But I think it takes time. And by the way, there are a lot of great organizations out there. I always say that, we're a lot of great organizations that have a lot of history and they're doing good work. I just think we need all the different types of work.
Yeah.
Right? I think historically there's been one or two kinds of work. I think they're just like women are nuanced. Mm-hmm. The community is nuanced, and it's not a monolith. I think you need to speak to people differently, and I think you need to engage them differently. And a lot of many nonprofits that are civic kind of do a lot of the more traditional civic work. Mm-hmm. I hear in the conversations, and we collaborate and stuff. Now they're like, oh yeah, we need to build community. It's coming back to that at the end of the day, it's about community. People feel a tie, feel a responsibility to their community. And if you're building community and they look to the left and look to the right and those people are all doing things and I'm not, oh wait, I gotta do something. There's something about that as well. This idea of being part of something beyond you, for you and for others, I think is really important. I think that's the way that it should be, and not just in words, but in actually doing,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as we wrap up today's interview, what's one message you'd want to impart to Latinas who are listening today about their power and stepping into spaces that might feel uncomfortable, but they should absolutely feel the urge to take up space in?
I mean, do it. Don't listen to the little person on your left or whatever, your little voice is saying, I can't. Don't listen to them. Go to your best friend, your partner sometimes, or, the people around you. They're going to be the ones being like, girl, you got this. I mean, I am honored and lucky that I had that multiple times throughout my career, that people would offer me opportunities. And I would always be like, oh, I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like something I can do. And I question myself. For whatever reason, right? That fear or whatever, you question yourself. Or it's not part of the plan or whatever. Take the leap. Take the opportunity. It's okay if it deviates from your plan. It's okay if it's failure. Because it's not failure. You just learned. You learned a lesson. You learn either what you're not good at, what you don't like. But now you know. That's a data point. Take the data point and keep it moving. It's okay. I have a 16-year-old and he has friends and I have a goddaughter and I'm always like, guys, you don't have to know exactly what you want to do right now. I'm still trying to figure it out and I'm 54. Right? It's evolving. If you would have told me I was going to be running a nonprofit 5 years ago, I'd be like, what are you talking about? No, I'm corporate. I want to be CMO of blah, blah, blah. You have to just be open to opportunities, be willing to take a leap, and trust that you have what it takes to do it. Because I'm 95% of you do. I mean, some don't. I mean, you know, but most people do. They'll figure it out. And and again, if you fail or if you don't get it quite right, at least you learn. You learn what you're capable of or what you're not into, what you need to work on more. I think those are important lessons, and those kind of add up to life and a big career.
Absolutely. And for those who are listening that want to keep in touch with you, how may they reach you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram, which is so weird. I'm at Chado's Web because I'm Charlotte, so it's Chado's Web. I'm on LinkedIn, you know, Charlotte Castillo. On LinkedIn, I'll give my email, charlotte@poderistas.com. And I answer most. Sometimes it takes me longer, and I'm always open for cafecitos. I'm like, let's do a cafecito. Like, that's my thing, because I'm, again, building community, and I've met so many amazing people that way. I'm happy to say, you know, they say when you're older, they're probably not telling you this yet, but when you're older, it's harder to make new friends. And I feel like in the last 2 years, I've made amazing new friends, and I love it. Like, every day, I'm like meeting new people, and it's through these cafecitos that we connect, and then you connect through stories, right? Just storytelling, and you realize how much you have in common, and you just kind of take it from there. So charlotte@poderistas.com. You can find me on Instagram, Chado's Web, on LinkedIn, Charlotte Castillo. I think that's it. I'm not going to give you my number.
Don't be calling Charlotte,
No,
y'all.
please don't call me. Or you can text me and email me. Oh, no, you can email me or DM me.
That's funny. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Behind the Work. If you liked today's episode, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Give it a rating on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on social media as well. Until next week. Mwah.